If you have been sabotaging yourself for years, then you have to watch this. Welcome back to another episode of the Nicole Vignola Show. Today I'm going to talk about the shocking psychology as to why you have been sabotaging for years and years, and every time you reach that point where you're about to do something great, you then buckle it all in and it crumbles. If this feels like you, then you have to watch this episode. You may or you may not have heard of something called learned helplessness. Now, learned helplessness is a condition, a psychological condition, where individuals believe that they have no control over their situation. They have no control over their ability to overcome adversity. This is a learned behavior that was likely adopted in childhood, especially under conditions of high stress or trauma, where a child wouldn't have had control over their environment, over their situation. This happens because an individual or a child has had repeated situations where something has gone wrong and they haven't been able to overcome it. When we have these repeated challenges continuously where there's no psychological wins, then the person just learns to accept their fate and they feel defeated and give up. This can unfortunately become a pattern where whenever things get tough, the individual may consciously or subconsciously start to think, well, it's not going to work out anyway. It always fails, and therefore I'm just going to give up before I disappoint myself again. However, the brain is plastic. What happened in childhood may have been something that is out of your control. However, we can relearn that we have a plethora of agency in adulthood. And through repetition, it is something that we can exercise and get better at. But here's the interesting thing. In 1978, psychologists Abramson, Seligman, and Teasdale essentially reframed the psychological condition to something called attributional reformulation, showing that humans don't just learn helplessness, they explain it to themselves as well. And the narratives can look like this. It's always my fault. It will always be this way. I can't do anything right. So not only do we learn this behavior that we can't actually do anything, we also then repeat it to ourselves in a narrative. We reinforce that pattern by explaining it to ourselves, which actually then led to the hopelessness theory of depression. It is something that I'll be covering in future videos. However, I want to touch on some of the symptoms that occur when somebody has learned this helplessness. Failure to ask for help, frustration, giving up, lack of effort, low self-esteem, passivity, poor motivation, and here's the interesting part, procrastination. Here's the other layer to this, is that then people who procrastinate start to think that they're lazy, start to think that there is something wrong with them, start to think that they are incapable, and therefore reinforces this pattern even more until they're so deep in a hole that they believe that they are not worthy of doing anything with their lives. Now, two ways to overcome this is, of course, in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. You will do this with a psychotherapist. And the other beautiful part about this is the social support, being able to ask for help, being able to recognize this. So you might be listening to this and thinking, wow, that is literally me. I want you to know that your brain can absolutely change. And from a neuroscientific standpoint, I'm going to give you two tools to be able to slowly start overcoming this. Tool number one is that whatever task you're working on, whether it be a big goal or just simply something that you're working on in small capacities, I want you to break it down into really small chunks, really manageable chunks. So I have clients that will literally write things like open emails, write email, respond to email, tick the email off, mark as unread, as simple as possible. Every time you get a win, your brain learns that you are capable of doing something. And yes, it may seem silly, but baby steps are exactly how you're going to get over that finish line so that eventually you can build the cognitive capacity to be able to deal with stress. You have to slowly expose yourself so that you can retrain yourself that you have agency and that you are capable of doing this. Step number two is that you want to build your cognitive reserve. And what I mean by that is you want to build mental resilience. And to do that, you have to teach your central nervous system that stress is not necessarily relating to something negative, because your body has learned that when stress arises, we panic, we give up, because we have no control in the stressful situation, because when we were children, we couldn't control our environment. And so that association of uncontrollable feelings then merged with that feeling of having your stress system high and activated. We need to retrain the body that we can be in a stressful situation and it's not necessarily a bad thing. And we do this by putting ourselves under voluntary stress. And we can do that through exercise. Exercise is one of the best ways to voluntarily put ourselves in difficult situations, knowing that we're safe. You can also do this through hormetic processes like the sauna or a cold shower or an ice bath. Asterisk on those statements, because not everybody will benefit from a cold shower. If you're in a state of high chronic stress and PTSD, then I would 100% not recommend that you do something like a cold shower. But you can see the point I'm getting at is that you want to slowly put yourself in difficult situations, knowing that you can overcome them. Exercise is predominantly one of the best ways to do that. So you could take up running, weightlifting, and it needs to be something challenging. Pilates and yoga are great in their own respective forms. However, what we want here is we want the central nervous system to activate a stressful response. When you're running, you've got a lot of adrenaline running through the body, and that's a good thing. So it needs to be challenging to the body, and that way you will teach your central nervous system that the two can coexist, stress and calmness at the same time. And it doesn't need to be panic in a way that makes you retreat. Guys, I hope you found this helpful. Please like, comment, and subscribe. You'll be helping the channel grow. We're taking this to the stratosphere and beyond.